Something doesn't smell right. That's what South Carolina Republican Congressman Mark Sanford said today after hearing the news that UN Ambassador Nikki Haley submitted a letter of resignation to the president last Wednesday, saying that she would remain in office until the president could find his next UN ambassador. Mark Sanford knows Nikki Haley better than most Washington politicians do. He served as South Carolina governor and then encouraged Nikki Haley to run for governor at the end of his term, which she did, and she won, and was serving as governor when Donald Trump selected her for UN ambassador. Here's what Mark Sanford said about Nikki Haley's decision to leave the Trump administration.
Something doesn't smell right. Something's weird. I can't put my finger on it. You know, her head political guy by John Lerner, used to be my lead guy, and that guy keeps his nose to the political winds. He has a acute sense of what's going on, and so either there's another shoe to drop from a Trump standpoint, something that we don't know and that she wants to get out of the way of, or alternatively, there was this inquiry, I guess, put in yesterday on private planes, and given what she saw happen to Price and what she saw happen to Pruitt, maybe she just doesn't want to, risk the possibility of blemish or the possibility of being pushed out, as both of them were.
On Monday, Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington called for an investigation into 7 free flights that Nikki Haley and her husband accepted last year on private planes from 3 South Carolina business executives. The news of Nikki Haley's resignation emerged in stages today in Washington. First, Axios reported a leak from 2 sources in the White House saying the president had accepted Nikki Haley's resignation. And then the White House rushed an impromptu announcement by the president and Nikki Haley, who made it official.
We'll be speaking all the time, but we will miss you nevertheless, and you have done a fantastic job, and I want to thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. For all of you that are going to ask about 2020, no, I am not running for 2020. I can promise you what I'll be doing is campaigning for this one.
The White House released Nikki Haley's resignation letter, which included the extraordinary promise that she would not be a candidate for office in 2020. No one has ever left a presidential administration and had to put in writing that that person would not run against the president in the next election. This is another first for the Trump administration. Nikki Haley has several incentives to leave the administration now. First of all, a 2-year run as UN ambassador is a perfectly respectable run. Many UN ambassadors have served less time than that. Some have served more. But a politician with a hope for a future as a politician has no incentive to stay at the UN for too long. Nikki Haley has padded her resume enough with foreign policy experience to now be a credible candidate for president in 2024. And in the meantime, she will no doubt want to make some serious money. She is not one of the rich people in the Trump administration. She's been living largely on her government salary and her husband's income. She has tuitions to pay for her children, and so she can leave now and make millions of dollars doing speaking engagements, being on corporate boards, and avoid any of the tarnish that she might pick up from another year or so of being associated with Donald Trump. Nikki Haley's doing exactly what she should do, exactly when she should do it if she hopes to have a political future. And by dating her resignation letter October 3rd, she's proving that she made this decision before what could be a disastrous election result for Republicans in November. Back with us, Ambassador Wendy Sherman, Jennifer Palmieri, and Jason Johnson. Ambassador Sherman, you have seen people come and go out of the foreign policy establishment of administrations. What's your reaction to this one?
I think you've got it right, Lawrence. I think this is brilliant timing on her part. Not only all of the reasons that you said, but this puts her on A1, not A14, in the Washington Post or the New York Times after a midterm election, when people like Attorney General Jeff Sessions may be leaving, and Don McGahn, and people who have some real, scrum that are attached to them. She's not part of that story. She does this on her own time, in her own way. I also think it did 2 other things which are fascinating. It has really led the news this evening, not the lock her up and not Kavanaugh. So the Trump administration's effort to try to say that the Democrats and women are a mob victimizing him. She now is a woman who has come forward and said, I'm strong, I'm clear, I'm independent, I'm going my own way. So I think that's useful in the larger meta message. And the other thing that she's done is she's actually really sort of put her finger in the eye of Secretary Pompeo in some ways, because she's leaving him, even though I think he's probably happy she's going, he's leaving him without really having a UN ambassador. It will be a long while to get one put in place. The deputy perm representative is very competent, but brand new, doesn't know the UN system. There is no assistant secretary of international organizations at the State Department. I suspect that John Bolton, who hates the UN, thought when he was UN ambassador 10 stories of the UN building should be lopped off, and doesn't believe in anything multilateral, probably doesn't want the next UN ambassador to be a cabinet secretary either. So she's accomplished quite a lot in one fell swoop.
And Jennifer Palmieri, it is striking that this announcement came the day after Crew filed this complaint about her use of private planes, certainly something that she knew was coming, but she did have that resignation letter predated to last week.
Yeah, and it's all, I mean, I love this story because there's so much that's savvy and inside Washington. It's sort of, you know, it's almost an old school story, like the kind of thing you would cover during the Obama administration. But it, I mean, first of all, you have Mark Sanford throwing shade at his South Carolina rival, speculating that she has ethics violations. So, you know, I will remind for viewers the ethics problems that then Governor Sanford had when he ruled that state. And then you have the Trump White House, which I think probably didn't want to go from headlines about their victory lap, if you will, in winning the Kavanaugh nomination confirmation, to having to answer questions as to whether or not a woman from Donald Trump's cabinet might run against him. That probably wasn't the message that they ideally wanted for today. And then you have Haley herself, who I think that is very skilled at, you know, I know people who know her from South Carolina, at this kind of positioning and at stagecraft. And while, you know, I think if we're honest about what we find so weird and sort of suspicious about this is that it was a very gracefully executed rollout from the Trump administration, which never happens, right? There was a leak, you know, that was just maybe an hour before the actual announcement. You had a beautiful announcement in the Oval Office. Her remarks were clearly prepared about what she was going to say and all the marks that she was going to hit. The president was very gracious to her. These are things we don't normally see, and that's what we found so puzzling about
and the other thing we don't normally see and have never seen, Jason, is someone announcing leaving an administration, sitting beside the president in the Oval Office and saying out loud, I'm not going to run against him in the next election.
Yeah, Lawrence, don't you love that these loyalty pledges are not just like in the administration, but everything afterwards? It's like a lifetime pledge that you can't ever do anything. It's an NDA if you're a part of this administration. Look, that makes sense to me. I'm sort of in agreement with you, Lawrence. I think it's just 2 years. She wanted to go. She wanted to make some money. I've never thought that Nikki Haley was a moderate. I never thought that she was reasonable. I will never, as a decent American who cares about human beings, forgive her for what she did about the Confederate flag and the fact that she didn't even consider moving it until 9 citizens were murdered in her state by a white nationalist, and then she eventually relented. I never thought she was going to be a viable candidate in 2020. So I think this is about money. I think this is about getting out now. And if we're thinking about 2024, who knows what this country could look like then? We might already have a woman president. We might have somebody that she can't beat. So I don't think this is about 2020. I think she's just time to go.
Jason Johnson, Wendy Sherman, Jennifer Palmieri, thank you all for joining our discussion tonight.